Okay, I think we're live. Welcome to my channel, Maybe Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we have a very special live with some of my very good booktube friends, a couple authors, and Zamil Akhtar himself, who is the author of the book we're going to be talking about today, Death Rider. Put that up on the screen. I think everyone's got their copies. So I think it might be best to let everyone here introduce themselves to start. So if you're watching this, you probably know me on my channel. So why don't we just kind of go around? Steve, would you like to go first?
Sure. I am Steve from Steve Talks Books. I like reading dark and disturbing stuff, so Zamil's books are perfect for me. And it's always great when we have the group together, so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you, Taylor, for hosting, and thanks everyone for making it tonight. I'm excited to talk about Death Rider.
Tell me about it. PL, you want to go next?
I echo Steve's sentiments. Thank you so much, Taylor, for hosting. This is amazing. This group is near and dear to my heart. So Avengers Assemble once more. Here again to gush about Zamil's books. He's quickly become one of my favorite authors, and he's just incredible. I encourage everyone to, if you haven't read Zamil Akhtar's books, you will in the future, so you might as well do it now. And I'm honored to be part of the fan club. I'm PL Stuart. I'm the author of the Drowned Kingdom Saga, and once again, happy to be here.
Lana, you want to take it away?
Okay. Hi, I'm Lana from the booktube channel Lore Lullabies. I'm from Australia. Well, I live in Australia. I'm from New Zealand. And I'm super pumped to be here with you guys again. It's just so cool. And again, Taylor, thank you for hosting. And yeah, that's me.
Okay. Zamil?
And I'm Zamil Akhtar, author of Gunmetal Gods, Conqueror's Blood, Death Rider, and Lightblade.
Okay. So this is the first time we've had this group together on my channel in particular. I think we've always gotten together on Steve's channel. So anyone watching, if you know Steve, his lives are, his bread and butter, kills it with those. So I think this is the first time we've talked about this series on my channel, but we initially got together to talk about Gunmetal Gods, which is the first book in this series. And we all loved it. It's not really a spoiler to say that. I will be sure to have the link to that down below. There we go. Feel prepared. I'll be sure to have the link to the original down below, as well as we did a live for Conqueror's Blood, the second in the series. So that will also be, that was on Steve's channel, will be linked down below. But today, as I mentioned, we're talking about Death Rider. So this is a novella that is a prequel, right, Samuel? Prequel,
Yep.
Right, to Gunmetal Gods. So one thing I wanted to kind of get straight ahead of time is, what is your recommendation as the author? Should people wait to read this, or should they read it after Gunmetal Gods? Because on Goodreads, it's listed as 0.5 in the series. I do have a friend that read it and really enjoyed it, but felt like they were maybe missing some major plot points. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, what would you recommend for people, looking to read this?
Yeah, I think that it can be read first, but you do gain an extra layer of understanding if you read Gunmetal Gods first. Because Gunmetal Gods, since it's a full novel, it very slowly sets up the whole conflict, whereas Death Rider just plunges you into it. And I think readers who read Death Rider first, they kind of feel like, well, I was dropped into this conflict and I don't really know what's going on. And that's kind of the feedback I've gotten. Although I kind of did write it that way, I kind of wanted people to just assume that, yeah, there's this war going on. You don't really need to understand why. But some readers still found it a little bit jarring. So I definitely do recommend you read at least Gunmetal Gods first.
Apologies for that. I'm fighting humidity in Japan right now. So all of the command strips, if all my lights fall off, don't be surprised, because all the command strips are falling off in the humidity. So don't mind that. But thank you. That's a really good place to start, so people know where to start with it. But I do think it's important to say that we will be going into spoilers here. So if you don't want to be spoiled for this novella, maybe, come back when you've read it. But I don't think our discussion will spoil too much of Gunmetal Gods. Do you guys think? Maybe not, right? So it seems like a pretty separate world. So I think you're safe to watch. Yeah. If you haven't read Gunmetal Gods yet. So but without further ado, let's get started with the book itself. So I had a really interesting experience with this book. It is small and there is so much in here. There's so many things packed in here, as there were with Gunmetal Gods as well. But I found when I first read it as a character-based reader, I couldn't connect to characters at first as much as I wanted to. But the themes really came through even from the beginning. But the more that I sat with it and the more that I thought about it, the more I liked it and the more connected I felt. So while initially I thought, maybe a 4-star for me compared to the main installments in the series, it's become a 5-star over the 2 months I've sat with it. So I had a really interesting experience with this book. But right now it's definitely sitting at a 5 stars for me on Goodreads. So I'm curious for you guys, what were your thoughts? What was your kind of journey with it? And where is it sitting for you guys? Let's start with Steve, maybe?
Well,
or PL, or anyone really.
This one was, it's weird because it feels like a long book because it just feels like so much happens in it. There's so much packed into these. It was a one sitting read for me, and it's small, but there's so much in it, and then there's so much to think about when you're done. So I don't think anyone will be spoiled in Gunmetal Gods if they want to read this first, but I think you probably should read Gunmetal Gods first because it's awesome and gives you a little bit more background. But I loved it. I think I sat there and thought about it for like a day. It had a little bit of a hangover after, like thinking about it, and I went back and read some pages just to kind of make sure I didn't miss anything. But I really loved it. I think it was great. There's so many great themes in it. There's so much that happens that lots to think about from such a short book. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, excuse me. Definitely, 5-star read for me. I had a similar experience. It's funny because I posted I was reading it, and then people were like, "Oh, great, you're reading it." I remember Taylor saying, "Oh, great, can't wait to hear what you think." She'd said that about Steve when Steve posted he was reading as well. And then because it was such a short read, it was a compulsive read. Like I literally had the morning. So I'm like, okay. And then it was done. Right. So I started, in the morning, like 8 or 9, and then I was done by lunchtime. And I have to say that what I loved about this book is that because I've read Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood, and this is you're dropped into an event that takes place in one of those books, but you're part of this it's almost like you feel like you're in a story within a story. And that's what I love about, that's one of the features I love about writing, when you kind of feel like in a story with a story. So you have all this context about the universe and a lot of the characters, but you're not dealing with them, and you're dealing with, someone else's unique life and experience, how they're seeing this particular event. And I love that. But I think the thing I love the most about it was that, the main character is someone who, again, we get this through her eyes. She's on one side of the conflict, but then because of the character she interacts with, and like I said in my review, Zamil does this like no one else. He brings out all sides of the conflict. You get to see the motivations of the people on the other side, even if it's through the eyes of one character because of, her dialogue with the other characters. And it's so fulsome. Like you always feel like, is this person the good person, the bad person? Like how do you treat their perspective? And that's what I love about Zamil's writing, is that you have a real appreciation for the characters, not just being gray, but this is their moral perspective, religious perspective, etc. And then these are the people that interact with, and although it's so different. You have empathy for both sides. You appreciate both sides. Like it's just that's just brilliant. So.
And just to continue on from that, like because of how the story is told and the different backgrounds from, like, even though, as PL said, like you're getting the point of view from like the main character, it still encompasses everything. But because of that, I never know what's going to happen in Zamil's books. Like, never. And just when I think I'm like, oh, this is going to happen, nope, no, it's not. Something else entirely different is going to happen, and it is so much better than I thought it would be. And this, like, 100% a compulsive read. I could not put it down. Like, every page I was like, oh, like every single page. Like, you guys know I love to annotate. I didn't have time to annotate. There's like 2 highlighted bits in the back that I was just like, I need to highlight these. So I physically put it down, went and grabbed a highlighter, and then highlighted. But other than that, because from like the first page, I was like, I need to get my highlighter. And then before I knew it, like I was on the epilogue and I was just like, what happened? But it was just, I'll wait till we get into spoilers, but like just 5 stars for me.
Yeah, just to go on that, I also read it in one sitting months ago because I couldn't stop. After Conqueror's Blood, I immediately went into this because I was like, I need more. So it was very compulsive for me as well. So from the writing perspective, was it also like, I need to get this story out? Was it a very compulsive thing to write where you just couldn't stop writing it and you needed to get it out? Or was it more a slow thought-based process? Or like, what was your experience writing this?
It was actually pretty difficult to write. I started the first page maybe 6-7 times, and I threw it away each time because it just wasn't flowing. And I had different ideas for it, played with different characters, and all those other versions just didn't work. It finally started to flow once I figured out the character of Daria. Once I figured out who she was, and like what she wanted and what her place was in this whole conflict. Once I figured all of that out, then it started to really flow. And I wrote, I think I wrote actually the first like 3/4 within a few days. And then it took me a little while to think, basically to figure out what the ending would be. It took me, I think a few weeks to actually like figure out what was supposed to happen. Because I had, the way I was writing it, it sort of felt like it could have been double or triple the length. And I didn't want that to happen. I did not want it to turn into a full novel. And I think authors who write novellas will tell you that this is a danger when you write a novella, that you just get carried away with the idea. And it turns into a full novel. And I did not want that to happen. I wanted this to be a novella. So it did actually take it. That was actually the biggest challenge, was creating an ending for a novella that could stand alone by itself and that could work. So it was challenging. It was my first novella. And, the overall process was pretty difficult, I'd say. But, I kind of want to write more novellas, although I have to figure out when I'm going to do that, just because it's a self-contained small story. You kind of have more freedom in a sense that you can end it how you want, and you can kind of make a definitive ending, and you're not trapped in this idea of writing a big, huge story or a series. So, yeah.
That was actually a question that I had from this before you go into spoilers, because I feel like once we talk about any of the plot, it's going to be spoilers because of how small it is. But the god in this book could have so many implications for other things in the series. And so that was a big, you don't have to give away spoilers, of course, for future, installations in the series, but having this particular god be a self-contained story would definitely simplify things. Or there's the choice to make it part of the larger series. And I'm just curious, are you able to say whether that will happen, or is that something that is not allowed at this point in time?
Yeah, it's very tricky because you don't want readers of the main series to be forced to read the novella for context and background, because a lot of them just won't, just because it's a novella. It's a 0.5. So I guess maybe 20% of main series readers are actually going to read it. That's just a guess. I have no idea. So if the god does return, it would have to be in a way that does not require any context from this book. Now, this god is actually referenced in the other books. His name actually does come up, and he's described in I think in Gunmetal Gods. So that's kind of the fun with the mythology here, is that I can take some of these gods and you know in a different book actually expand upon them. So I'm not going to say definitively that this god won't return, but it would have to be in a way that stands with itself and doesn't require the novella for context.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think. Does anyone else have non-spoiler thoughts? Go ahead. Yeah, PL. You had some stuff.
Yeah, I want to comment that Zamil's books now, the one thing that there's so many reasons why I love his books, but the one thing that's really starting to get me now is how he plays with my emotions. Like he really takes me on this emotional roller coaster ride. And one of the things I love is the way he reaches right into my heart. And when a character's saying something, he makes it so relatable to everybody, the way you would think about some aspect of life, right? And I can't describe it to keep it clean, for sake of not saying any profanity, but there's this one part where Daria, she's I don't want to get spoilers, but she's thinking about her relationship with her husband, and her husband had saved her life in a battle, and she basically said, essentially, I'm paraphrasing now to clear up, that their lovemaking was that much more intense because he had saved her life, and you just have this feeling of the fleetingness of life, and that just the fact that your husband just saved in the middle of a battle, and it just like the way, Zamil, that you draw out these, like I can put myself in her head and her emotions and how she's feeling and what that felt like. It's just incredible. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're one of my favorite authors now, is because of that emotional connection you make. You create this commonality, the way you describe things, that just like I can totally understand, how she felt and what that made her feel. And now she's doing it in a retrospect and reflecting about her relationship with her husband. Is just, the way you bring these things out is just, it's marvelous. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Well, what's crazy too is in this book particularly, this is not a spoiler because it's on page 1, but it's a doomed character. Like you make us care about a character, we know is doomed, and that's unfair. Honestly, I feel attacked, but I definitely agree with PL that you have a knack for that. Definitely.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole time I was just like, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well. But I still couldn't help but be there and be 100% with the main character.
Yeah, she was a fun character to write. I think especially because I knew that I didn't have to take her forward into another novel. And so I could make her doomed in that sense. And I could, I could basically take her in any direction that I wanted to. So, and I didn't have to save any revelations about her for the future. I could just put everything on the page, starting from page 1. and just, go all out up to the end of the novella. So in that sense, I think, in my mind, she was a very vivid character, and I could pour as much as I wanted to on these pages, just because I didn't have to save anything for later pages and later novels.
Yeah, she definitely came across as a very vivid character.
Yeah, that's
And you
that's
made,
interesting. Oh, go ahead, Lana.
sorry, and you made her a mum as well, which I was just like, that's automatically going to get my heartstrings.
Yeah.
I was just like, what are you doing to me, Zamil?
I think we talked before, maybe it was offline, but the popularity of like the crazy mom, the crazy MILF, archetype, we talked about that. And I was like, I feel like this was already written before we had that conversation, but, nailed it. And I think I've never thought about it from that perspective of, as a writer, the freedom that a novella gives you. I guess I'm not a writer, so I wouldn't think from that perspective, but it makes a lot more sense the way you can just kind of go full tilt with her story and put her in really messed up situations from the very beginning. But I think that's a really good transition into spoilers, if you guys are down for that. Okay, so if you're watching and you don't wish to be spoiled, now is your time to click out. But let's go for it. So talking about the initial messed up situation, being on a firing squad, on the receiving end of firing squad for, page 1, that was interesting. I've never read a book like that before.
Yeah, I think you always want to start. This is like writing 101. You always want to start with a hook. So I think the whole idea of kind of the theme of the novel is, intertwining the ideas of victory and defeat and life and death. So she starts the story, about to die, and she survives that incident. The gun misfires, and you can kind of think, if this sort of thing happened, back in the day, and some king was about to execute someone, and like the sword breaks in half or something, or just whatever happens, the noose like falls out, they might see it as a sign of God, and they might be like, I've changed my mind. So I wanted to play with that idea, and obviously it's not just luck that causes her to survive. You eventually learn that as you read the novel. So as in Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood, the gods are not, just figments of the imagination or just confined to religious beliefs. The gods are actively there and actively involved. So yeah, starting the story on that point and just ramping it up as within a few chapters, that was kind of the whole fun of it.
I was gonna say active is a nice way to say that.
You totally had me faked out. I actually thought what was going to happen is she's going to get executed, but some part of her life was going to be integral to something else, and you're going to flip POVs and have another character come in. But then when the gun misfired, and then the Shah decided to spare her, and then we knew she's going on to be part of the death res. Like, oh wow, like, so this is something where, I thought, okay, she's serving a purpose, but there's no way she's going to make it, right? And it was brilliantly done, with like Taylor said, having that emotion, and right off the bat you care about this person being executed. You don't even know her. It's the first few pages, right? And then it's just that sense of tragedy that it's a life cut short, and it's a life cut short because she didn't die in battle. She didn't die because she failed in her mission, according to the Shah. Like, so she was basically a casualty of the fact that as a leader, as a general, failure was not an option. So, and that's a harsh reality, of especially, ancient warfare, which happened, that, you were held, Tom will be held responsible. When you're fired, you're fired, right? Like, you know what I mean? So that was, I thought that was incredible. And it really brought, as Taylor said, right away, you're brought to this emotional, you're like, and then, when you realize she's only escaped one fate, but it seems that it's virtually impossible that she's going to escape being part of the Death Riders, but still you have this glimmer of hope that maybe, okay, somehow she can make it, and you just barely know her. And that's what, again, that's the brilliance of, as Taylor said, you making us, and Lana, I think Lana said as well, you making us attached to these characters. And this is only a few pages in. I'm like, oh my God, well, she has to make it now. Like, so, but I think she's not going to, and you're getting all emotional about it. So yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, Zamil and his carrot of hope, just dangling it there. I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop.
PM, carrot of hope. That gets trademarked now.
For me, the other thing was, like feeling for the Shah, because because Daria already has a relationship with the Shah, and like he loves her like his own, but he's just like, I still have to do this. I'm still the Shah. This is the consequence of you failing. And the way that when she's like, oh, can I talk to you? The way that they talk and he asks her for advice and all of that sort of stuff, I was just like, it blew my mind, because I was just like, how, like, there's obviously like love and respect there, even though if the gun didn't misfire, she would be dead and this conversation wouldn't be taking place. But it was just another side to Shah Jalal as well. I was just like, this is super, super, super interesting.
Yeah, that I'm always, whenever I'm writing about a king or a Shah or an emperor, I think that's kind of where a lot of my fascination is, because I think that a lot of fantasy stories don't go too in depth about how the kings feel. Often they're either painted as being cruel tyrants or they're painted as being magnanimous. It's either one or the other usually, when in reality a king can have both qualities at the same time and struggle with being merciful and also having to dole out punishment when appropriate. Because the realities of not just ruling a kingdom, but managing a siege that is lasting for months and months, the realities of that, of keeping order, of keeping people motivated, of managing your army, the emotional toll it must take on that king. And that you absolutely have to punish people. Obviously, punishing people for failing, that can be seen as pretty excessive, but you do have to punish people for example, if someone tries to run away, you would be shot for trying to run away from the battlefield. That was a pretty typical thing to do. But in some cases, the person running away could be your friend, could be someone who you've been working with for a long time, who but you still have to dole out the punishment. You can't be seen as doing favors for people that you are acquainted with, because then people won't see you as just. They'll see you as showing preference. So I'm it's, to me, it's just very interesting to go into the mind of a ruler in that kind of situation, and to see their psychology, and to see how they balance these two aspects that are opposing each other, but they have to still do it. That's what it means to be in charge, basically.
Yeah, I totally concur. I find that aspect of kingship and leadership, especially in the ancient context, fascinating. And the fact that, I think people are always looking for, in the attributes and qualities of a king, to be a good person, but they're sometimes diametrically opposed to being a good king or queen or ruler, right? That, and it's the same in the modern context as being a good CEO. You're going to have to make decisions for the company that someone else may look at and say that it's not moral, it's immoral, or that's wrong, or that's unfair, or it's not kind, or it's not. However, it's an effective decision that will keep your shareholders investing in the company, keep the company afloat, keep people employed, and then I think there's that perhaps sometimes we innately understand it, but we don't want to face it, that being a king or queen or ruler is a job, and some of the things you need to do in that job aren't nice things, aren't things that as an independent human being, as a person who doesn't have these responsibilities, you may be free to make certain choices that you're not free to make as someone who's in charge of a kingdom, etc. Right? And I too find that utterly fascinating, and you do that so well, Zamil. I love exploring that in my writing, and but you do it in it's such a compelling way in which you show us that struggle that a ruler has to, like you said, be just and merciful, and yet they need, frankly, they need to hold on to power, right? The king or queen can't be effective if they lose power, and if they have their subjects revolt against them because they're not seen as exercising their power judiciously in the best interest of all concerned, then yes, they can lose power. So I think that's fascinating.
Definitely agree with that. Something that you also said that kind of connects to this, but you said earlier, was, I think PL said it, that you're worried about her. You don't want Daria to die, right? So we start in this situation where she's supposed to. And then, as Lana said, we get this kind of surreal situation where she's having conversations with people she shouldn't have had conversations with because she was supposed to have died. And then, I'm assuming you did this on purpose, but once she becomes a Death Rider and she's in the thick of everything and everyone around her is dying, I'm like, this plot armor is off the fucking chain. Like and I think it's supposed to be written that way on purpose, because even she's thinking in her head, why am I not dead? Right? So she's basically saying what the reader is thinking. It's kind of like a almost Marvel movie level plot armor, when you're in the thick of it. And then, of course, you twist it around and tell us why that's the case. So my question is, was that a specific thought you wanted your reader to have so that you could do the bait and switch at the end? Because I definitely was there, where I thought, there's no way that this is not going to have some kind of twist at the end, because she should not be alive. So I'm wondering if that was a specific writing technique you were using when you were writing it.
Yeah. So the battle scene, I wanted it to be as horrific as possible. I wanted it to be just absolutely off the charts in terms of the horrors that Daria was experiencing, and especially during this era of warfare when people are using swords and arrows, and they're also using guns, and they're throwing bombs, and I think this era of warfare was especially just crazy and brutal. And Daria, absolutely, if she was just a normal person in a normal situation, she would have died pretty much immediately. But I was also playing with the concept of hell, in that, if you're in hell, you don't die. You just endure the suffering over and over and over and over. So in that context, Daria, she literally falls into a huge sinkhole, and everything is just burning all around her. But somehow she's unscathed. And in the moment, you're not gonna be thinking about it too intellectually. You're just gonna be like, I gotta get the hell out of here, or
And she's also on mushrooms.
yeah, that's true. She's also been taking mushrooms. So
Good point.
So she's not all there. She's not really able to process all of it. But at some point, she decides to prioritize her survival, because she's sort of seen enough. she was ready to die twice and she didn't die, and now she's like, yeah, that's enough. I have to see if I can get out of this situation, but she ends up just going deeper into it, into an even worse situation. So yeah, that was I guess it was literal plot armor in that sense. It was like literally plot armor.
Yeah, that was crazy because you had me for a minute thinking, is this a hallucinogenic thing brought on by the fact, hey, Thiago, nice to reply. Yeah, was this a whole psychedelic experience brought on by the mushrooms? So maybe she's dead already, or she's, because she's on the mushrooms, she's seen this stuff. Maybe she's fallen down and she's out of the balcony. But I was like, okay, so what's going on? But then when I did realize what was going on, that this was divine intervention, it's like, oh man. And then you threw us for another loop because for me, the whole build up to the Death Riders thing, it was just like breaking my heart, because you think about, these people who, they're going to die, they have no chance, they get the worst armor, they get the worst weaponry, they're just cannon fodder. And it was just a very poignant, it really brought out a lot of emotion. And I've heard of that concept before of you just have these sacrificial lambs basically that they're just there to perhaps a distraction, etc., for the main army. But but the fact that, like I said, when she was in it, my thing was, is this real or is this not? Like, is she just, because she's on the mushrooms, is she already dead? Has she gone on to an afterlife? Like, that's where you had me, like, I didn't really know what was going on. And like as a reader, like, you take this part, I don't want to get fooled. Like, I know something's coming here. Like, maybe she's dead already. Or like, what's happening, right? But you're so good at that, Zamil, in keeping us in that suspense that, okay, what's going on here? And then when you realize, like, oh my gosh. So yeah, it was awesome. That was awesome.
The best sentence to drop in.
Words, I wanted to make it as horrific as possible. I'm here for it. So, yeah. I think the mushrooms is a really good point, Lana, because I knew that, but I had forgotten about it when I was thinking about the situation. And I think PL's right too. When you know a twist is coming, like I said, like you said, literal plot armor. This has to be on purpose, was my thought, and I was trying to figure it out. I did not by any way, shape, or form, but I was definitely trying to figure out what was going on.
Yeah. Same. I had like two options. I was like, it's either the magic mushies or it is like some divine intervention, but I did not at all think what it was. And that's what I mean by, I'm like, oh, it's going to be this or this. And I've like kind of think I've got it maybe figured out a little bit. No, you're not even close, Lana. Stop trying.
Yeah, he's a tricky guy, that Zamil. He's tricky, man. He's tricky. But I did love Zamil's point about the horrors of war. Like, I love when a novel depicts something like that war is brutal, it's not pretty, it's messy, it's ugly, it's dirty, but also these moments of just heroism and this ability to face death bravely and fight for a cause. These Death Riders, they knew they're going to be taken out in a few seconds. And in other words, what can you really accomplish? Why am I there? I'm just going to die. I'm just going to be, fodder for the cannons. Yet I can still do something. I can still, take out, one enemy. I can still be part. I can still contribute to something larger. Like, my death will be totally meaningless. Like, that concept is just wow. And it just leads me to think about war in general. Whether in modern warfare, the last 100 years or so of warfare, World War II, Normandy, storming the beach. You know what I mean? These soldiers that know that they're probably not going to make it, but they're going to contribute to something greater than themselves. Their lives being sacrificed is gonna be, it's like a little brick in building a wall. That's good. I just think that those themes, Emil, like, the way you explore them, like
it's an interesting tactic, and it's been used. It's still being used to this day, and it started around the time. Well, I think it's always been used, but basically, when you have artillery, or even if you have arrows, but especially when you have artillery, cannons, even modern artillery, you want a force to go in and keep the enemy away. But that force that goes in and does this job is also going to get hit by the artillery that you're using. So their job is literally just to be a wall to stop the enemy from coming too forward. And if the enemy comes way too forward, your artillery, you won't be able to use your cannons, basically. So that's if you're in that position, if you're that person who's in that unit who has this job of just rushing in and tying the enemy down, and you're going to get killed by your own side's artillery, most likely. What does that mean? And I think for some armies, they probably try to inject some dignity into it. They try to make it a solemn thing, maybe like a martyrdom type of thing. And you can kind of see this with the Death Riders, even though it's still a punishment in a sense. It's still considered an honorable way to die, and they bathe themselves in the lake. They're showing some reverence to themselves before they go into this, and they even, I think they pray, and there's some solemnity to it, even though there's no, when they're actually experiencing it, there's no dignity in how they're dying. They're just getting exploded. But in their preparation toward it, there's some dignity and there's some solemnness to it. So I did want to show that, when I described this.
Yeah, I immediately thought about Japanese kamikaze pilots in World War II, that there was this immense honor in flying yourself into an aircraft carrier, and because you're going to potentially sink that ship and destroy thousands of seamen and help turn the tide of the war. And that's immediately what I thought of with the Death Riders, that there was, like you said, there was some sense of privilege almost in sacrificing yourself that way. So
something that stuck out to me with speaking of warfare is that this war hadn't been going on that long. It's been going on for a while, but that's all that they remember. They don't remember life before. It's consumed them. That's all they know. They don't remember anything before. And when they do, it's just in bits and pieces, but it just becomes their life. It just totally consumes them. So those kind of things that are explored in a genre like fantasy, it always gets my attention.
Well, what I like too is you took that theme and made it literal. So, to jump to the end, the time twist of like the time loop that they're going through, I think Steve really connected with that there by saying war feels perpetual to people, but in this world, it is perpetual. It does not end, and the suffering does not end. So I think, taking that theme, making it an actual plot point really drove that home for me. The idea of the cyclical nature of violence. A lot of adult fantasy deals with that, but to make it such a literal thing, I think that really drove that point home for me, stronger than other books have.
Yeah, that was the whole. I think that the cycle of violence is the major theme throughout the whole series. In some way or another, it is always in play. One war causes the next war, which causes the next war. And, you see this in history with World War I, World War II. The peace of World War I caused World War II to happen, in a sense. So it's a theme I love to play with. And I think injecting cosmic horror into it just makes it a whole lot stronger, because, when we reflect on it in terms of history, we sort of get the sense that we are at the mercy of this idea. Like, we as humans want to escape this cycle of violence, but no matter what we do, we can't, because, it's a cycle. It's already running, and it's out of our control now. We can't go back in time and stop the first act of violence. It's its own entity now, and no matter what you do, you can't quite escape from it. So in that sense, it's sort of a horror that exists with us in this world in a very real sense. So I wanted to turn it into a Lovecraftian horror in the story and sort of make it, personify it in that sense. So that's kind of where the idea of the time recurrence and the war ever repeating because they're stuck in a time loop. That's sort of where that idea came in.
Oh, I think you're muted.
You're muted, Tara.
Sorry. So I wanted to put this up because it is very intriguing, but I want to let you know, Tony, if you don't want to be spoiled anymore than you already have just now, there are a couple other things that we haven't mentioned yet, but if you want to dip out, I respect that, but it's well worth a read if you're still going to hang around. So
yeah, Tony's a very interesting author himself. He writes Shadows of Ruin and the Shadows of Ruin, great book, Nigerian African-inspired fantasy, historical fantasy, very cool stuff. So, yeah, with and that's what Taylor and Zamil just discussed. I also want to draw on this other thread that perhaps is there, and that is that because Zamil described this ineffable, unescapable, you can't get away from this cycle of violence, but also I felt about the fact that with your destiny, are you locked into a certain destiny? Can you change to some degree, alter slightly a destiny to make, I mean, in Daria's case, if she could have gone back, she probably would have wanted, to make sure that her children were safe, right? As an outcome of if she had to die, well, part of it is, or having her son have honor. She initially was questioning Shah, why isn't he allowed to fight? And the Shah's like, well, I have bigger plans for him. If you die, he might be the next leader, like of your tribe. I think what I loved about the book, Zamil, as well, was that linked in with that concept of the psychobots was with all this Mobius loop of, you're caught in this repeating of history. Can you alter it slightly to not the overall outcome, but these little tiny outcomes that will make a difference in other things? Perhaps not the totality of the circumstances, but can you like if, for example, if you didn't get a chance to fall in love with this person, can you still have the relationship and still end up dying in the end? You know what I mean? If you didn't get a chance to see your children being born, can you still and so what was fascinating to me is I just kept wondering, can you have those little, can you cheat? And even though you can't escape the ultimate, outcome, can you have these little moments that you wish you had, and that's what I was always wondering about when reading your work, that, is everything going to be exactly the same? Because it wasn't exactly the same. You're reading your books, like the outcomes weren't precisely the same. So you just wonder, like, okay, can you make these little, these little adjustments in time to,
I try to have some hope in the stories, a little bit. I think that what really can change the outcome, and this is true in all three books, is learning to empathize with the other side. So this is also the case, I feel, in real life, in present day, where when you learn to empathize with the other side, to see things in their shoes, from their perspective, that's when you really come to an understanding that they are, in a lot of ways, the same as you are. And once you realize that, I think that can create common ground by which wars can end and you can have some enduring peace. And I try to show that in this. I tried to show that in this story, where Daria does meet, these characters who were living in the city that her side was sieging for all these months, And she does begin to understand them and to empathize with them. And it's not to a great degree at first, but it does create some room for her to trust them. And eventually, because there's some trust that gets built up between them, they're able to escape the time loop. And that's sort of analogous to them being able to escape war. It's only when you empathize with the other side and you realize that they are also suffering, and their suffering might be as intense and as real as yours. And they also have mothers and children and fathers and, everything that they have lost. And, human beings fundamentally are the same, even though languages and religion and all these outward things might be different. So I think that's sort of that's sort of the idea here. And that's sort of a glimmer of hope, because our in the real world, we're not that far away from total extinction, unfortunately. So I
This
don't
whole
want to.
okay, I just have to say, you started by saying I like to keep a little bit of hope, and here we are, not far from extinction.
I mean, we've all been worrying about nuclear annihilation for the last few months, so we're not that far away. So I don't want to have too much hope in there, but just a little bit.
Just a carrot.
Just a carrot.
Trademarked.
Exactly.
It's trademarked. Done deal.
Yeah. Sorry, Taylor? Were you gonna say something?
No, go ahead, Pia.
No. So Zamil, I guess, and I know you can't give us away, and the series isn't done, and there's so much more we have to see, and we're already like, it's what you've painted here. The 3 books that I've read by you so far, it's such a vivid picture of the fact that yes, war is bleak and grim and horrible, and we're stuck in a cycle of violence. And maybe in terms of your world, behind the scenes, there are capricious gods that are manipulating the outcome and laughing, and or have their own reasons for perhaps perpetuating, or inciting certain conflicts, or at least taking advantage of the conflicts, even if they're not the direct cause. Because if nothing else, the human beings believe that they're the cause. They believe that they're fighting for Lat. They believe they're fighting for this god, this. So they use that as their motivation to kill each other. So is your series? And I know perhaps you can't say this because the series isn't done yet, and we'll all be obviously reading the next books. Is your series, beyond being a commentary on the horrors of war and in some ways the pointlessness of war, and the fact that we need to understand each other and empathize in order to, is part of what you're trying to get across to the reader, the fact that war is something that is more human made than anything beyond that. It's a human made construct that, we justify it for political reasons, for religious reasons, for simple greed, outright greed. I want this territory, so I'm going to take it, right? Are you saying, is it a commentary about why we go to war, and what our motivations are about war, and the fact that potentially we use a lot of excuses to justify war, and at the end of the day it is fruitless? Is that part of what you're saying as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there are 2 aspects to the wars, I think, in all 3 novels, and that is the human aspect and also obviously the cosmic aspect, and both kind of play off of each other, and both are relevant. And me personally, I've always felt that war to some degree doesn't make sense, and then to some degree it makes total sense. So there are always these 2 sides to it, because war most of the time is ruinous for yourself, even if you just look at today the situation with Russia and Ukraine. the war is completely ruinous for Ukraine, but it's also been ruinous for Russia. I mean, they're completely isolated now. They are, their economy is suffering. The people there are going to suffer greatly. It's been ruinous to both sides. So what was the reasoning for it? And that sort of goes back to the inevitability of war, in that there is some sort of, it's obviously, when we're talking about the real world, it's something within us. It's something within human nature. It's something within, just within history and the way history has unfolded. But within the Gunmetal Gods series, a lot of that is casted onto the gods and onto the cosmic entities. In that, okay, sure, let's just talk about the beginning of Gunmetal Gods. You have Micah and you have Kiva. They're both very similar in a lot of ways, but there is something driving them toward war. And, a lot of it is human made, but then there's this sort of aspect that even we in real life don't quite understand what makes us this way. And so that's kind of, casted onto the gods. And, no matter what you do, to create peace, there's still this inevitability that you're going to end up in war. And the gods are the ones making it so in Gunmetal Gods. Whereas I think maybe in real life, it's something within us that we don't have a handle on as a species.
One thing that stuck out to me too is when Daria makes it into the she goes through the tunnel and she talks to Argus, and Argus is like, why don't you just leave us alone? We have nothing. Like we're eating each other, and we have nothing left. We're all dying. And she said, well, that's what we do. We just conquer. We just keep going until when? When does it end? We just, like you said, just part of human nature that we just want more, and we just want to keep expanding and keep going. And there, it's just, just I guess you don't really consider those things until after. But when Argus had that moment of, why did you have to do this? Why did you have to come here? Like, why did we have to go? Why did you go there?
There's also this.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah.
I'll
just say quickly.
Rock, paper, scissors. No, go ahead.
I'll just say quickly. There's always this element of mistrust, and it's even in the world today, where one side doesn't know what the other side is going to do. And so it always benefits you to act first. And so I think this is mentioned in Death Rider, where they said, well, if we didn't go to them, they would have come to us. So we had to act first and put the battlefield in their territory instead of ours. So this is a problem that persists to this day. China doesn't know what the US is going to do. Russia doesn't know what the US is going to do. The US doesn't know what they're going to do. Nobody knows what each other is going to do. So that's why countries decide, well, I have to act first and just do this. So, yeah.
I think also connecting to that is, having the gods take on that role in this book, which we've talked about how, grimdark and darker fantasy allows us to take a view, like an outsider view of ourselves, and assess things maybe we couldn't assess because we're too close to the situation. But I think what the gods do in all of these books is they allow you to assess some of these motivations and these themes that we're talking about from an outsider's perspective. Like, you can look at it in a character. You can look at it in the book and say, okay, well, it's not a human doing this. It's this being doing this, but the reasons of the being are the same as the ones in our world today. And it allows you to reflect on that in a way that you probably couldn't see it in yourself, and that's something I really notice. I talk all the time about how I love the gods in your book, and how that they don't care. And I think that's really key for allowing us to reflect on why war happens. It gives us an avenue through which to explore that. I think that's one of the beautiful things about fantasy in general. But yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that your books make me think so much, Zamil, about the relationship between humans, gods, religion, in a way that very few books have ever made me think about, and that's a big thing in my life. That topic, that subject matter is really big to me, and anyone that reads my books will know that. And I think what you've shown me with your books, Emil, is that, you know, a lot of religions think about gods as being obviously not just having divine qualities, but being, you know, obviously above human foibles and frailties and all these things. And then, but at the same time, if you think about it, so many religions and so many, you know, so many faiths, you know, believe that humans are made in the images of gods and goddesses. So when you think about it, it's only natural that gods would have those same, like somehow we think, well, gods are above all this, but yet if we're made in their image, then they have these same jealousies, you know, lusts, you know, anger, you know, selfishness, and all these things that when your books, we actually get to see them. We see their manipulation. We see the fact that they're, you know, that they're vindictive. We see the fact that they have, you know, all these what we attribute as being negative human traits, right? And but yet we forget, you know, because when we think of gods, of deities, we think of them as being, you know, these beings that are on a higher plane of existence and thus above all of these petty things, right? But really, if you think about it, when we think about gods, we think about gods as being these beings that are, you know, we're made in their image. So, you know, but yet we expect them to perform better than humans. And really, you show us that, well, not necessarily, right? And that's what I love about reading your books is that, you know, and I don't know what God is, she, they, he, them. If God exists, I obviously, as you don't know that, but I love the way you depict your gods, and that I find that they're very human in all the worst ways, yes, but very human. And I love reading stories where, you know, whether it be Madeline Miller, you know, she writes, you know, Circe and Song of Achilles, and you know, books like that where you can, you know, I'm going to read Christian Cameron's new book, Against All Gods. That also promised to be fantastic in that same vein. But Zamil, what I love about your books is that, yeah, you bring the gods down to a very, they're still scary, terrifying, you know, all powerful, but you bring them down to this human level, and you make us examine what we feel about these gods. You know, we put them up on a pedestal, but yet, you know, they can be horrible. So just like us.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of the fun in writing these books, is that you can sort of ask the question, what are humans to these gods? And, you know, how would humans understand them as well? So, you know, like it's a very classic question, like what are ants to us, for example? Well, ants, we just walk around and sometimes we step on them, and, you know, we don't really care. We don't really mind them too much, even though ants are amazing creatures. I mean, they're incredibly intelligent. Have you seen like some of the things they accomplish? It's unbelievable. These are highly intelligent, highly social creatures. I mean, they're mind-blowing how awesome ants are. But, you know, you see an ant, you smash it, you step on it. You don't give a damn about these ants, even though they're freaking amazing. I advise everyone to just go read about ants. They're incredible. So, you know, to these gods, humans, you know, they could think of humans in a very similar way, in that, you know, yeah, we you know, whatever, you know, maybe we'll have some fun with them. Maybe we'll use them for some reason. Maybe we'll step on them one day. Maybe we'll, you know, whatever. They're just ants to us. So it's that's kind of you know, I think that's a very Lovecraftian idea as well, and that's an idea that I love to play with. And, you know, writing these kinds of gods is just fun for me. And it also goes back to a lot of my origins as a horror writer, in that, you know, in horror, you don't want the monster to be too obvious, and you don't want it to be too apparent in the story, but at the same time it has to create a sense of dread and tension, and it has to be looming. And so I try to strike that balance in that, you know, the gods are not too distant as to be completely unimportant, but they're also not too close as to be too familiar. So it's you know, it's you have to write within this margin, but it's a lot of fun. I think that's one of my favorite things about these books.
Well, when you say, PL, that, you know, the gods kind of reflect us, I hope most of us aren't as bad as Saklas is. Like, I really hope that he reflects the worst of humanity. But I just lost my train of thought there. There was a connection I wanted to make. But I guess if we can take a minute to show some of the comments we had, which was from Lucas. Love the Gunmetal God Saga. After recently having finished Lightblade, your future books have certainly become an automatic buy for me. Thanks for your work. So, love that. Love that. Haven't gotten to Lightblade yet. It's coming.
Oh my god, it's so good.
It's coming. Believe
It
me.
is so good.
I just want to just quickly break in here and say, you know, and Zamil, honored that I think most of us have Lightblade in one form or another. Zamil was kind enough to send us arcs. For those of you that don't know, Taylor and myself were both judges with Before We Go blog for the current self-published fantasy blog off. Lightblade is entered in not our group, but so we're hoping that maybe if Lightblade makes it to a finalist, then that's why I've held off on reading it, hoping that Lightblade makes it. So good luck to Emil with that.
Yeah.
So hopefully
we're waiting for our chance, you know, to to jump on it. So.
Yeah, that's the only reason I haven't read it yet. Otherwise, I would have read it a long time ago. So.
I was actually thinking that when I started reading it, I was just like, oh, PL and Taylor can't read this yet. I was like, I'm going to enjoy this so much more.
Well, when you asked me, Zamil, do you want a arc? I was like, why are you asking me? Just send me the link like immediately. But yeah, unfortunately, couldn't. But.
Yeah, that's why I can't be a judge, because I wouldn't be able to hold back. I wouldn't be able to hold off.
Well, it's a good thing. So hopefully, again,
even Lana, no spoilers, okay?
Yeah, no spoilers, please.
I wouldn't dream of it. I would not dream of it.
No, you definitely want to experience it without any spoilers or any idea, really. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good palate cleanser after writing Death Rider. Actually, it was kind of fun to play with different ideas, I guess.
Yeah. Can't always be doom and gloom, right? So, great video with an author. Happy chatting. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a hey.
Hello.
So to come back to where we left off with the gods, this particular god is a piece of work. You know, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name right now. Novia. To go.
Niobe, I think.
Niobe.
There we go. I had the right vowels in there. It's the wrong order, but Niobe, I felt so sorry for her. You know, at first you're so angry. And then you realize what she's going through and what she's actually in the clutches of. You know, you realize that Saklas, is that how you say his name? That he's there. And you're like, oh man, talking about playing with my emotions, I thought I was going to hate her through and through. And then you find out why she's done what she's done. And yeah, I felt a lot of sympathy for her. Because what would I do, you know, if I was in that situation? Maybe the same. I don't know.
Yeah, it was.
I'd probably just tap out.
I kind of wish I could have written more about these characters, because I did enjoy them a lot, especially Niobe. But you know, I told myself this is a novella, so you know, I found her to be a really interesting character to write.
Yeah, and of course, you know me, I am a hopeless shipper, and you know, the minute Niobe hooked up with Sarah's son, I was like, okay, maybe it's a chance for happiness, but no, it can't be, because they're gonna go back in the time loop, so there's no way. So, you know, it's just like Taylor, I had this immense sympathy for her and wanted so much for her to be happy and to escape, and to find some semblance of happiness after what you've been through. And you just always wonder, like, will that always be with her, that trauma of going through that, all that she's gone through, no matter what, even if she escapes and finds a way to have a normal life, and will that always be with her, what she's had to do, what she's had to experience. And it's that's, like I said, Jamil, you truly know how to pull on the reader's heartstrings in so many ways. Like, after, I could not stop thinking about this book. Like, after, I was like, whew, like, like, I just could not stop thinking about this book. And your books leave an impression with me that few books do. There's books that I read that they're great, they're fun, they're amazing, they're 4 or 5 star reads, and it was great, it was fun, there was action, blah blah, and then I'm kind of on to the next book. But not your books. Your books stay with me. The characters stay with me. Conqueror's Blood and Gunmetal Gods are still with me. Like some of the characters there, like, it's still very much with me. And what I love about it, that these, all these books are interconnected, is that I'm still in the same universe, and you still make references to certain characters, and it just brings me back even more to those other books. So yeah, I love that.
Easter eggs are awesome. They're a joy to read. For me, it's the themes that stick with me. Not that your characters don't, they absolutely do. But for me, what like gets into my soul is the themes that you work with. And also, we talk about the gods, the Lovecraftian horror, the imagery in this book. There were a couple pages where I had no idea what the hell was happening, but I knew it was horrific. Like, I was like, are there worms inside these bodies, or am I reading this wrong? Like, the horrific level of this really stuck with me in a good way. Like, it had me thinking about it for months now. So I think for me, the Lovecraftian horror is what really sticks with me, along with the themes that we just talked about of like the perpetual cycle of violence, and violence against women is something that you've talked about in your other books as well, and the cycle of that. So a lot of those things really stick with me, but particularly this book was the horror aspect of it, because I'm not as learned as Steve in the horror genre. I've dabbled, but yeah, I don't know if they were as shocking for a horror veteran, as Steve is, but for me, I was like, what did I just read? Yeah.
As I was reading, especially with the worms, like initially with the worms and like the bloated bodies in the moat, I was just like, oh, this is disgusting, give me more. And then when like they went into the Crucian, when they went into the thing, the Crucian, what are they called? Like the 4 that had the eyes weren't there, then the worms went into them. What were they called?
The excubators.
Those ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, this is awesome. But just on oh, sorry, actually, Zamil, go.
Oh, I was just gonna say I miss writing full-on horror, so that kind of came through in Death Rider, because I just miss writing pure horror, which I used to do back in the day. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And because I hate worms as well, so I don't know why, but like, because for me, I was just picturing maggots.
Yeah,
like
grubs, maggots,
big long maggots, like just, and I was just like, this is disgusting, but I love it. But on like just going back to Niobe, there's a couple of things that she said that I was just like, yeah, because I was thinking the same thing, especially when it came to the gods, because there have been a couple of times throughout this series that I'm just like, how could you think that, like, from what you're experienced, how could you still think that these are like benevolent gods, like, and you still worship them and all that? Because I was just like, they are messing with you. You know they're messing with you. Why are you still like, duh? But she says, she's like, if you had any wisdom, you'd know that something merciful would never create the earth the way it is. Everything here is trying to kill us or make us suffer. And I was like, that.
Well,
that
yeah.
one right there.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I must say that was the only time in the book, and it's a short, obviously it's a short, that I was like, what's going on here? Well, I was lost for a minute. I had to go back and like, is this what's happening? Is this what's happening? Like, is like you said, is it like, is this these worms? Like that was the one part in the book, and that for a minute I was like, okay, hold on. And believe me, Zamil's writing is very clear and it's vivid, and you can definitely understand. You know, like I've never really been lost in Zamil's books in terms of not knowing what's going on. It's like, I'm reading Malazan right now. Believe me, I understand now about being lost. So you know. But anyways, you know, but that was the one where I was like, what the hell's going on here, right? And but it was great. It was in a good way. It wasn't like, you know, and I think that passage that Lana just read, that was so impactful and poignant and so spot on too. And it just reminded me that yes, you know, like that passage was about, you know, sometimes we feel that, and I think that's why some people, and I don't want to get a whole exploration or commentary here about that, but why some people turn away from religion. I've had friends that have said, you know, well, you know, how can you believe in a god or gods or goddesses that made this world and made it so crappy, right? You know, and I guess taking that viewpoint, if you look at it as being negative, that, you know, that we're in a world that's all messed up, you know. But I think when I read your books, Zamil, I think what it reminds me again, as I said, is that, you know, the gods are, while they have their own agenda, because what happens to Daria specifically and Argus and Novia, like they're still there's still free will, even though there's, you know, you have these gods, there's still free will, and there's still the ability to make choices. And I say this a lot about what I love reading fantasy specifically. I love when the characters make these choices independent of, in the face of these overwhelming circumstances that normally you feel like you're trapped, but they make choices to do good things, or they make choices to be brave and escape, or rather than lay down and just, you know, like they make these choices. And I love your characters make these choices for good or bad, and a lot of them, you know, when it's good, it's really, it shows a lot of courage. So, you know, I do enjoy that about your books as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one idea that I do enjoy playing with, and this is kind of a historical idea as well, is this idea that there is an evil god, or God is evil. And if you look at certain religions in the past, Manichaeism is one, Gnosticism is another. People actually did believe that there was a good God and an evil God. And they believed that the evil God is the one who created the world, and the good God had a different world that they wanted to go to, basically. And so you ask yourself, why did these people believe that this world was created by an evil God? Because the world, if you're like a medieval peasant, the life was very difficult. You know, you lived and died. You got like diarrhea and you died. You know, it was that simple. A worm could bite you, or something could bite you and you died. So why wouldn't you think, if you're in that situation, why wouldn't you think that the world was created by an evil entity? And so that's, this idea kind of persisted throughout history. Right now in modern day, it's not within the major religions anymore, but it was back in the day. So that's something that I definitely play with throughout the series, in that the gods that you see, on the page are pretty malevolent. You know, they are, not doing things with humanity's interest for the most part. And, even gods that are referenced to be like creators in a sense, they are also, pretty doing things for reasons that are not benevolent as well. And the other point was that what was the thing you said, Stuart, just now?
Well, I said I was talking about the fact that the courage of human beings making these choices,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
When they're faced with.
I think that you know there's this idea that humans don't have free will, and you'll see this idea in religion, but you'll also see it in science. So many physicists will tell you that free will is an illusion. Everything is deterministic. Everything is determined. There is no such thing as free will, which personally I don't believe. And I kind of want to show that with these characters, that even though they are trapped within these schemes that the gods have created for them, there are moments where they can break free and they can sort of escape the inevitability that the gods tried to set out for them. So I think that's one of my hopeful themes, one of the few. And it's important to me because I think in my own life I've often seen that I'm going down a path, and because of my habits and because of my, you know, everything that I've gone through, it looks like I'll never break free of this path. I'll never be able to go in a different direction. I'm just too mired in my own habits, and but there are times when I've managed to just through sheer will just turn things around. And I think, often authors will tell you writing a book is kind of like that, where it's just an act of sheer will. Sometimes you're stuck in a rut, you have writer's block. You just have to will through it. You just have to purely go in there and just tear through it, tear through the barriers. So I do want to have that theme in there because it's something that I really believe in.
Connecting to that also, well, we know that Kin is my favorite character, and I'm waiting. But I have a big soft spot for like comedy relief characters. I just happen to love that archetype of a character. So I find myself, even when there isn't a character who embodies that, I find myself really enjoying and sinking into moments, little moments like that throughout stories. So what I think you do really well for me as a reader is it'll be this horrendous world with this cyclical violence, repeating itself. And yet there's a little moment, here and there of like happiness, or, even if it's just a line. And it's so funny because when I see that moment, I'm happy, but then I know something bad is about to happen because I'm reading one of your books. But there's a line that particularly stuck out to me in that exact vein near the end, where they have their like little time of peace, where they are able to get out of the time loop. And it struck me for a couple of reasons, but I think Argus says, he's talking about the river, and he says I think it's Sir Daria River. Argus exclaimed upon sighting the emerald waters. And then it says, I chuckled at the memory. Just Sir Daria. Daria already means river in Paramic, remember? And that little line of joking with each other, one, sticks out to me because I'm a reader who likes that. And two, because this happens all the time in Japanese, where people say river, river, or street, street, because they think it's the name, part of the name in Japanese, but it's actually the Japanese word for street. So this made me giggle so much as like a bilingual person, because I was like, yes, I know this. I know this feeling so well. So I just want to say, well, one, clearly what it's like to speak more than one language, because only someone who's experienced that would put that in there. Loved that. But also those little moments of hope, I really enjoy that little balance that you put in there. Because even though this is basically a horror novella, you were able to make me smile at some point. So, I really appreciate that too, as a reader.
Yeah, I feel like people are always able to joke and laugh, no matter what the situation is. Even in the most morbid, the most horrific situation, someone will be making jokes. I guarantee it. And it's a coping, can be a coping mechanism for some people. It's also just the way some people live their lives. They try to find the humor and the joy and everything. And I've noticed this with a lot of people. And you know, when you're writing, you do have to pay attention to tone. So if you were to make it completely realistic, the tone might be ruined by too much joking. And so you kind of have to sprinkle it in and add it in there for levity and to create a break in the tension. You know, while not ruining, I guess, the overall tone of the story. And that's kind of a tricky balancing act. Like, some people have told me they didn't like Kin, for example. They didn't like the you know, how this funny character just appeared, and sort of it was tonally jarring for them. But at the same time, I think it was just totally appropriate, because Kin is not even a human character, you know, and he's a Jinn, and Jinn are known to be mischievous and are known in the mythology to just be, you know, just to do things that are just completely ridiculous, basically, and to have no mind. Humans might be in the most horrible situation, but they don't care. They're a completely different species. So you know, I love Kin. So I want to write more scenes with him. But yeah, you know, I think it doesn't matter how serious the situation is, how horrific it is. Someone you need to laugh, and people will be joking.
Yeah, I agree, and I love the way when you intersperse that humor, and I can say that especially you know, like in my job in law enforcement, you know, we're always accused of having this very dark, bleak humor that we laugh at things that, you know, really we shouldn't be laughing at, and that is, I think, a response to the horror sometimes of what we deal with, and it's inappropriate, and it's something that you know, I think sometimes you find yourself in the company of people who do the same sort of jobs, and you totally get it, and you said, but then when you're in mixed company, you often have to be careful about, because it can definitely be perceived as insensitive, and it is essentially insensitive, but it's part of, I think, as you said, it's a coping mechanism. And when I dial that to the context of your writing, Zamil, where, you know, in an ancient type of world where brutality, life is very cheap, you know, like you said, if you're poor, you die from these you know, things that would certainly not kill you today because of advances in medicine and things like that, that, you know, life is very cheap, and it's short. Your life expectancy is short, and unless you live a very privileged life, and even then it is wars that, you know, like. And I think but I do agree that it's a good thing that, you know, that humor is injected, because in all the bleakness, because I think it does add a real dose of realism. But what I quickly want to say is that I cannot forget to give you immense credit for your world building in this book, because in a novella, in a book that's only 100 pages, the fact that you still keep us so immersed in your whole world with the sounds and the textures and the tastes and the sights. And I said this in my review, and if you'll bear with me, I do want to read one passage that just a quick one, and this is just an example of how well you do this. And it is when Daria is speaking to her son, and you know, they hugged each other, and he says he smelled like the mountains of Tagale, like the caves where bright-budded pileas grew, and he was cold like the breasts that descended from the peaks. His blood was not meant to water this soil 1,000 miles from home. And of course, she's worried about her son dying when she's saying that. But it's so poetic, you know, about his blood watering the soil. And like I said, but your world building, like I said, it's hard to have immersive world building in a 100-page novel. But hats off to you, man. Kudos, you definitely accomplished that. So just another one of your skills as a writer. So
Thank you. I think definitely writing the first 2 books helped in that sense, in that I had that world to go off of, and just, you know, I think that might relate back to why some people maybe found it a little jarring to read this first, in that it just supposes you know this world, and you're dropped into the world, and it's there's no explanation given for like why certain things are, and no one is coming and like telling you what the situation is, I guess. But that's just how I wanted to write it. And to me, world building is everything. I think it's probably the main reason why I wrote this series was to just create this world and to dive deeply into it and take people to different parts of it. So each of the the novella and Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood, they're all set in different parts of the world, which I think for some readers was kind of a turn off, because they were thrust into a different part of the world. And I think most writers like to keep it in the same part and build onto that. But for me, I just kind of want to show, I have this I just feel like I want to show the whole world to people. So yeah, that's just something I enjoy.
To be clear, said friend that I mentioned earlier, Reddit said, I'm not sure what I just read, but I loved it, so I'm going to read Gunmetal Gods now. So it was not a negative thing. It was like a gateway to get her into the larger series. So it wasn't a turnoff per se. It was just like you said, there isn't an explanation there. So that's why I started with that, what you would suggest personally, but it was not. She now wants to read the rest of it. So
awesome.
Yeah.
I loved that they were all in different places, but there was always mention of each of the places. So I was just like, oh, I remember that. And I remember this one. So I thought it was really cool. But like, as we were talking about, what we were talking about, like when Daria took them back to her home, and everything was like, there was like that hope, and I was like, oh my god, is this actually going to be a happy ending? And then how do you say that word?
I think it's excubator.
Excubator?
Personally, I'm not. I think so. Yeah, it's like a Greek word.
When the author says, "I think," you're allowed to wing it, Lana.
Yeah. The excubator that she meets on the way into the where Gregory and Naomi were, and then she went the hunting, and I was just like, because as soon as we saw him and he's just like, don't forget the wine, or like, bring me some wine, I was like, we're gonna see him again. And then we did see him again when she was hunting, and I was just like, oh shit. And then when he's just like, don't stare up at the heavens too much, I was just like, oh no. And then an Easter egg was dropped, and I was just like, yes.
Oh no, yes.
Yeah. I was like, because I love Easter eggs. I love highlighting and then like I just put a question mark on everything, and there's like, as I'm reading through a series or something, I'm just like, yes.
Love Easter eggs.
That what is it, Leonardo DiCaprio meme?
Yeah.
That's how I love feeling like that. So yeah.
But I don't know. I have to say though, and maybe it's not a fair assessment because I have read Gunmetal Gods and Conqueror's Blood prior to reading Death Rider. But I mean, I've read books where I read a book recently where it was really well written and it had great world building, and it didn't have a lot of exposition about the world building, but somehow, and I hate comparing, this author did a great job in their book, but something with Zamil's book is that even though you're dropped in, you still feel like you're there. And that's the difference I could say about this book and refer to versus, and again, I don't want to, perhaps I have my biases having read, and the advantage of having read the other two books, that somehow I just feel like, but I say this because when I think back to how I felt about Conqueror's Blood, let's just say Gunmetal Gods, because that was the first book I read. I didn't feel like I was dropped in. I felt like I was there, and that's the credit to Zamil's writing, because I've read books that have great world building and it's immersive, and it doesn't have as much explanation of the world building, but I still didn't feel I was there the way I do with Zamil's books. So that is a credit to Zamil's writing. It's the way he does it. It's the way he crafts it, and that's a skill, right? So and it's I'm not I don't want to slag on these other books. I'm just saying that the way Zamil writes, I feel like I'm there. I can smell it, touch it, taste it. I feel like I'm there, and that's because of the way that he writes. So.
Mm-hmm. To also just go off of what Lana said at the end, like when I said I enjoy the little moments, but I know because I'm reading one of your books, it's not going to last, so I savor it. When that last moment came, I was like, no. And you actually did mention by name, right? I think the Blood Star, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was like, there it is at the end.
I guess I do want people who read that first to have a mystery remaining for them to propel them into Gunmetal Gods. So I can't end it too conclusively, of course. Obviously, the stories for those characters, I guess you could say, are more or less concluded. But Daria encountered something which gets explored throughout the rest of the books. So I wanted to leave the reader with the impression that there's way more. It's not just Saklas. There's way more to this, this whole thing that's going on. And you have to read the next book to find out more. So I did want to leave the reader with that impression. So yeah, I guess you can't have too much. That's the thing with endings, I guess. If you're writing a series, you don't want them to be complete cliffhangers, but you don't want them to be too conclusive.
Yeah, I think that balance is pretty key.
I think I don't know how the rest of the readers here feel because we've all read Zamil's books. I feel like there's some books and series especially that I've read that I could kind of definitively I get a sense of where we're headed, right? I get a sense of where we're going, and I'm not sure if it was Lana or Taylor that said this, but I have no idea what's coming. Like I have no idea what's coming in Zamil's next book. It's like and again, I love that. I love that sense of uncertainty and not being able to figure out what's happening. I mean, there's been series and they're extremely well written, but I can guess most of the major outcomes, and I've been correct, and I'm sure we've all been there, where you're like, yeah, I kind of saw that coming. I have zero clue. After reading these 3 books and the 3 marvelous books that I've loved and I've enjoyed the whole thing and I'm totally immersed, I don't know what's coming next. So, but I'm excited to find out. So,
yeah.
For me, that's like, sorry.
No, it's just going to pass it off to others to comment on. So take it away.
I think the sense of the wide openness is even as a writer, it's one of my favorite things. Approaching the series is that there are different directions I could take it in. Even after I wrote Gunmetal Gods, I could have just written the second book from Kiva's point of view and kept it, within that frame. But me as a writer, I kind of like to explore I kind of like to evolve the ideas in unexpected ways. So even as a writer, like when I'm approaching the next book, it's also, I also have that excitement in that. For me, it's like, this is like uncharted territory, and I'm, going into it as a writer with like sort of like as an explorer. So it's a lot of fun in that sense for me too.
Yeah, I was basically going to say, I was going to ask if Steve and Lana, PL saying he has no idea. I also have literally zero idea what's going to happen next. So I was just wondering if Lana and Steve have any theories or if they're with PL and I.
I think it's pretty clear that I do not. Even as I'm reading, I'm like, this is going to happen or this is going to happen, and then neither of those things happen. So I'm like the worst at that in this case, in this series. Like, I love puzzles and I love mysteries and like the panic rooms or what do you call them? Like where you get locked in a room for like an hour and you have to like solve a murder. Those are like my jam. I love them. And that's why I like love working out like plot points and what's going to happen next in fantasy and stuff. And I try to do that with every book. I've never got it right with like any of Zamil's books.
Yeah, no idea what's going to happen next. And even in Death Rider, it's such a short book. I would have never been able to guess what would happen. I mean, there's no way I'd ever be able to guess the conclusion. So that's what I love about it, though, just because I'm not sure what to expect.
I think the best is when you're completely surprised, but afterwards you're like, yeah, okay. Like it kind of falls into place in a way. So that's definitely, I had the same feeling, but
yeah, it always makes sense that it doesn't. Like Taylor says, it always makes sense in retrospect that what happened, but it doesn't give you any indicators of what's going to happen next, and that's the beauty of it. Like, it always makes sense. The conclusions are very satisfying, even if they're not the ones you predicted, but it certainly doesn't tip you off to what's coming. The only thing I can say that I know that I feel, not that I know because I know nothing, but the only thing that I feel that's coming is that there will be some kind of climactic gods battle. That's the only thing in my head that have that. Somehow there's no way that all these gods with these competing interests and all, like, and after what seeing a bit in Conqueror's Blood, like that was just like oh my gosh, like something's coming.
I still see that scene.
Yeah, I know, me too.
I still think about that scene so often.
Yeah, that was just like, oh my god. So something is coming. Like, I don't want to say apocalyptic. Something is coming. I don't know what it is. I don't know who's going to be involved. I don't know what that means for humankind, but something is coming. That's the only thing I feel like. There is a sense of there's going to be some kind of a climactic battle. Like, the focus has been on the human battles in this series and the petty battles. And I know, Zamil, you're a fan of GRM just like I am, as like many of us are. That I feel like there's a greater battle to come that is beyond the scope of just these human, very compelling, but these human conflicts. That's the only thing that and maybe I'm wrong, but that's the only thing that I can sense. I know Zamil can't tell us regardless, but so we'll see if I'm correct about that.
Go ahead, Zamil, you and I.
I'll just say, I'll just say I won't. I don't want to say anything. Obviously, one thing that does excite me is playing with different ideas from cosmic horror. So definitely, the next book will have some. I think some sort of new ideas about cosmic horror that were not in the previous two books. So that's all I'll say, because that's something, and that relates to as you mentioned, the conflict with the gods, and that's something that's really, really exciting me to write about, because it's obviously that's an aspect that in the books that I'm really I just love writing about. But yeah, I'm excited to see what readers think of some of these new ideas that I have. So yeah, very excited.
I'm excited too. There have been like a couple of times where I'm like, I'm just going to message Zamil and be like, I have to know what happens to this person or this being. And then I was like, no, I'm going to wait. And then I was like, I'll just miss like a week later. I'll just be like, I wonder what happens. Maybe I can and I was just like, no, just leave it.
Well, based on that idea, I think that's a good segue into the question I did want to ask you, which is, obviously all of us are huge fans of this world. you know, PL and I are not able to read the Lightblade world yet. We will, but when can us fans, mega fans, is there an expectation when we can maybe expect another installment, be it a novella or a full length installment in this series? Can you give us
in
crumbs?
Gunmetal Gods?
Yeah.
So that's my current project, is the third book. So, you know, the writing process will be fickle and will be its own beast. And, you know, PL, you know exactly how that is. And I kind of do it like for the next few weeks, I kind of do have to take a little break because the Lightblade launch and just April and May were just insane, like just absolutely insane, preparing for this launch and trying to get the final draft done, and you know all the things that happened. Oh man, it was. So I'm taking a little while to recharge this month and a little bit next month, and I gotta take care of my health a little bit as well. Like I gotta exercise, I gotta go outside, I gotta get sun, I gotta exercise, I gotta do some things I wasn't doing while writing Lightblade. But I'm absolutely pumped to get back into Gunmetal Gods. Like I think taking a break and writing Lightblade was the perfect thing, just perfect, because while I was writing that book, a lot of ideas were percolating about Gunmetal Gods Book 3, and I was like feeling an excitement to get back into it. You know, after writing Death Rider, I was a little bit burned out. So now I'm feeling this excitement, and I'm just, you know, I feel like the writing process for Book 3 is going to go really well. And my hope is that early next year, it'll be ready to launch. So first quarter next year, like maybe, I don't want to give a specific date, but I'm ballpark, maybe March next year, you know, it'll be ready to go and it'll be, you know, available. So that's my hope. And, you know, yeah, I'm super excited to get back into it.
Awesome. Is that a pingy I see in the background?
Yeah, that's his cage.
Awesome.
He's chilling. I don't know if you can see him. You can see his ears, like you can see his ears just like right there.
Oh my god.
I could see him like just like bouncing past before, like hopping past. I was like,
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I know we were speaking about it before we came on. I just have to say, like, congratulations, Emil, on the amazing success of all of your books, but especially that Lightblade launch. Wow, that just totally blew up, and some like 50 reviews on Goodreads in a couple of days, and of course, you know, the big one in terms of getting on some major bloggers, getting some real traction there, and really your book, you know, shooting up. You know, I know you got hundreds of reviews on Goodreads now, on Amazon now for you know all your books, and that's big. So congratulations on the success, very well earned. That's just a testament to, you know, what a great writer you are. And now the word's getting out. You're not a secret anymore. People know about, you know, Zamil Akhtar. So, you know, you're not a secret anymore. So definitely going to be a household name. I have no doubt about that in the future. So kudos to you, and congratulations.
Thank you.
yeah. I can't believe it's been a year since I first read Gunmetal Gods. Like it just blows my mind. And then like to see like from then and see your like growth and like the projection from here on out. Like every time like I see like a big blogger or booktuber or anything like post anything about either Lightblade or Gunmetal Gods, I'm always just like,
I know, yes. I do the same motion. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, we're like, yeah, it's Zamil, that's our boy. Yeah.
You know, and it's seeing, you know, it's not just on Twitter too, and I want to make sure that's clear. Like the review that I have up has gotten so many more views from people searching, like from YouTube search. So not from people finding it through my channel or anything. People are specifically searching reviews of your books. So, you know, it's not just on Twitter. So
I'm also seeing it a lot on Facebook too.
Yeah. Really? Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, in quite a few of the groups that I'm in.
I feel like
what's left? Instagram and TikTok, right? This is the last two apps you gotta get on.
I
I
very
made a TikTok, but
sorry. Go ahead.
I actually did make a TikTok a few weeks ago, but I honestly don't know what to do with it. So.
You're in the wrong group to ask for that. I feel like
Yeah.
we're just as clueless.
Yeah, no. I get the gist of it, but and how to do the things, but it is so time consuming to do a 30-second video. Takes just as long as it does to film a YouTube video.
Yeah.
So I'd rather just do that.
I'm definitely seeing a lot of love, and I'm not big on Instagram in terms of but I definitely see on Instagram like Zamil is just absolutely going crazy, and just in a general sense of being part of the writing community. If I may say, SBFEO has really become, a big indicator of what the self-publishing world is doing with fantasy, and what's popular, which authors are trending, what books are trending. And believe me, Zamil Akhtar is trending everywhere, right? And and I know I'm not trying to put additional pressure on Zamil, because I know there's enough pressure in SPFBO as it is, but I can certainly say that Lightblade is certainly hyped as one of the top contenders, if I may say. I'm just being honest here, that people are expecting it, and the cover did really well in the cover contest, and so and it's a brilliant cover. So and all of Zamil's covers are just, we all look at these covers and we go, wow. Like Beth Tabler, who leads, wonderful Beth Tabler leads Before We Go blog, she always just talks side chats about Zamil's covers that they're just awesome. So you have the whole package, Zamil, in terms of the exterior and the interior, obviously. So yeah, it's for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is a dream come true for me, because I since I was very little, I wanted to write books. I wanted to tell stories. I spent my time in class daydreaming. I was not focused in school at all, and my grades reflect that very much. So my parents at times were very disappointed, but now I feel like a lot of those things I daydreamed about in class are in my stories, weirdly enough. And I spent a lot of time reading books, playing video games, watching TV, and and I used to think this is just people used to tell me this is a waste of time. Go and study algebra or do all of that stuff instead. But now it seems like that stuff is all what I use to write. It's a lot of my inspiration. So that's a dream come true, basically. To your childhood ambition basically is bearing fruit, and that's all I can say. I'm immensely grateful and just happy that my books have been well received, and yeah, I'm just that's all I can say. I'm just really happy about it, and
Well,
thank you to everyone.
You've got a permanent cheerleading team in the four of us. We're all day, every day, retweets, whatever you need. So, but I do know it is probably pretty late for Lana at this point. She's an hour behind me. So we're all coming up on the 2-hour mark, which is not surprising for this group, even a little bit. So, if you're seeing this group for the first time on my channel and you go watch the lives on Steve's channel, they're all this long when we all get together. So, I don't know. It's just delightful to talk to this group. So I'm sure that we'll continue to have lives, when we can, maybe for Lightblade or something, even though it's not part of the Gunmetal Gods. But I would love.
Oh, that's a must.
We can talk about it, not to put pressure on anyone, but I can foresee this group getting together again on someone's channel somewhere, be it Steve's or Lana's or mine. So, anyone have any final thoughts that they wanted to get out? Any themes, or we're feeling good? Okay.
I just want to quickly say, so for please, everybody who's watching, listening, to keep tags on SBFBO. Lightblade is one of the books entered. Keep tabs on all the books. They're all fantastic self-published books. Authors like Zamil. Obviously, Zamil is definitely getting a name for himself, and is now one of the more prominent self-published authors. But there's tons of authors who perhaps are not as well known, but write amazing books. So if you want to discover your next self-published gem, check out SBFBO, where Taylor and I are both judges with Before We Go blog, and check out our reviews as well. And go to Goodreads, go to Listopio. All of the SBFBO books are listed there. So SBFBO is a great method. And back in Lana, hopefully she can say something about the indie chords. That's another great way of discovering indie books. So yeah, just indie books.
Yeah, I was going to say, we can all do our sign off. So I think that's a really good transition to that, tell people where they can find you and stuff. So going off of the SPFBO thing, 100% agree with that. But let's go, like Lana, like he just mentioned the India Chords. I know you just launched it, right? So
yes, just launched India Chords round dos. So round 2 kicks off at the 1st of July. It is essentially just a month-long readathon where we read indie books. I've made it really, really broad, simple this year. The prompts are really broad. There's only 9, and you can double up the books. So it's really easy. I just really, really think that more people should be reading indie because they are written exactly as the stories were intended to be. And that's like the tagline of this year, probably next year too, unless I get creative. But yeah. And like Taylor is 100% a testament to why I do the indie chords, because last year Taylor was just sort of getting into indie when she joined the indie chords, and now she's a freaking SPFBO, yes, I got it right, judge. So that's kind of like that's the reason I do this, is to get more people reading indie and just loving it as much as I do, and now Taylor does as well. So yeah. So come and join Team Dark Knight, which is me and Steve.
Yes, I'm on the same team.
Yes.
Yeah, I can be the poster child. You can, be like, this is my goal if you want.
Oh, were you not aware that you already are?
Oh, no, well, I will put on that mantle. And then just to close it out, Lana, where can they find you specifically? Not just the India Chords, but if they want to find you.
I am on Twitter and Instagram as Lore_Lullabies, or just Lore and Lullabies on YouTube. I also have a blog, which is loreandlullabies.com.
Great. PL, would you like to close your, do your ending tags?
Yeah. So again, I'm a blogger with Taylor and Steve with Before We Go blog, led by the incredible Talber. So you can see my reviews there on www.beforewegoblog.com. There are usually most of these are posted on Goodreads. You can follow me on Goodreads. For my books, etc., and the Drowned Kingdom Saga, it's www.plstore.com. So a website. I am humbled to be Steve's co-host with Page Chewing on his channel, where we interview creators from the writing community. And we have 2 episodes actually coming up this weekend. So it's kind of we're crazy that way. We just jam it all. We call it Jam Pack June for this month for Page Chewing. We're just gonna pry our eyes open with the sticks like we've been talking about. So, and Twitter's my preferred social media platform. You can find me on Twitter. DMs are open. You want to talk about writing? You have a question or something you want to talk about? And I am on Facebook and Instagram as well. But again, Twitter is my preferred social media platform at PL Stuart Writes. So come say hi.
Nice. So join Team Dark Knights with Lana and I. Join the team that's going to win. One of the 9 prompts is to read a host favorite, and one of my favorites is Gunmetal Gods. So if you watch this and you want to read Gunmetal Gods, join our team. You already have a prompt covered for Gunmetal Gods.
Yeah.
I can be found mostly on YouTube or on our forum at pagechewing.com or on Twitter. I also use Vero, so I'm on Vero, and those are the best places to find me. But always open to chat or just talk about books or whatever. So a pleasure to always meet up with all of you and to be here. Thank you, Taylor, again for hosting and Zamil for making time out of your busy schedule, because don't forget about us when you're when you're a big shot.
When you're big, right?
Yeah.
Never.
Did you have anything you want to say, Zamil, about Lightblade, where they can reach you, a website, anything? Access to your books?
So my books are available on Amazon. So just search Lightblade or Gunmetal Gods on Amazon. I also have a website, zamilakhtar.com. You can get my social media links from there.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming and everyone for watching.
Thank you,
you know
Taylor.
where you can find me. Yeah, you're on my channel if you're watching this. But you can also find me on Twitter, and all those links are always in my description box below. I quadruple join the India Chords Readathon request if you're watching this before July. But yeah, thank you all for coming. It's a wonderful chat, and we look forward to talking with everyone again soon. But for now, I guess we'll head out.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.